As the town grew, there were some issues with getting the roads built and maintained. Some of the businessmen and people in Langley felt that they weren't getting the return from the taxes that they paid to the county seat up in Coupeville. And so there was a push in 1913 to incorporate the town. Women in Washington state had the right to vote granted to them by the state legislature in 1910. And so for women, this was the first time that they could exercise their right to vote for incorporation. So it came to a vote, and the vote was 64 for and 57 against. And so the town was incorporated in 1913. Now, as an incorporated town, you also had to then have an administration, a town administration. So now we had a town that was incorporated. There was a town council, 5 men and a mayor. And they set up a bunch of ordinances and they set out to run the town. The women, though, were still interested in universal suffrage. And at that time, in 1913, there were a number of states in the West that had granted women the right to vote, and the push was headed toward the East Coast to get the U.S. Congress to grant universal suffrage.
Well, in 1919, suffrage came for women. For the first time, women could vote.
There were a number of women who got the idea that the town was not being run well. The coffers were way down, the streets were muddy, people weren't paying attention to the ordinances. It was just, they thought they could do a better job.
Things in Langley were not happening according to the way the women wanted them to happen. There was a great deal of drunkenness in the town. The taverns were open too late. The streets were full of manure and piles of rubbish, and there were cows and goats roaming around, and the women wanted to do something about it.
But in 1919, I think spurred on by the fact that there now was this constitutional amendment granting women the right to vote, they got an off-year election, and they put up a slate of women. There were 3 women and one for mayor.
And most of the men laughed. Sure, go ahead, ladies. See what you can do. So they did, and they won.
And 3 council women and 1 man were elected in that election, and 1 mayor, Helen Burwell Coe. When the time came for them to be put in office, and then the mayor, who still had a year to go on his term, resigned, gave up his seat. So Helen Coe became the first female mayor of Langley in 1920. The 2 male councilmen at the time, when they apparently found out they were having to work with these women, resigned. And so the women appointed 2 other women to the council. So by June, they had an all-women council and a mayor running the town.
And so for the first time in this regional history, and maybe in the national history, I don't know, there was an all-woman city council.
Now, they thought that this was perhaps the first town in the United States that had an all-women council. Turns out they weren't the first in the nation, but they thought for a while that that was the case.
Well, these ladies went to work. They organized work parties. They cleared the rubbish out of the streets. Some of the people in town had sort of casually moved their fences into the street so that they could put animals of their own into the street. Lady said, no, pull those fences back. This is your property line, this is the street. They built sidewalks so that the ladies could walk in town without getting their skirts dirty. They purchased the town's first fire engine because fire was a tremendous danger. They did what they said they were going to do. Despite the laughing, despite the ridicule, they went in there And they did it.